Welcome back, kids and coaches. This is Dr. Mike here again. And today we are jumping into Unit 2 and the first learning outcome here, which is about describing the hierarchical structure of muscle. So what we're going to be doing here is breaking this down from a fundamental standpoint. So first off, when we look at muscles, we have to look at what they actually are doing for us. We have over 400 total skeletal muscles that make up our body, and this accounts for a little less than half of our total body mass. So for the most part, you have muscle, water, and then kind of other stuff that makes up your entire body mass. Now, the function that skeletal muscle is going to provide us is primarily force production. So what this does is it helps us to move, breathe. It can also help us with posture. So the whole reason why, we sit up straight is because the muscles in our back keep us erect and upright. It also helps us with heat production. So this is something you don't normally think of, but the muscles will actually almost vibrate themselves to create friction-based heat. This will help us stay warm when we are in a cold environment. Now, when we get into the actual structure of muscle, we want to start out from the top or from the biggest point and work our way down to the smallest point or the microanatomy of it. So the very first thing you have is going to be your bone. All muscles have to connect to a bone, and then all bones connect to muscles via a tendon. So you always have a tendon to connect bone to the muscle. Covering the entire muscle belly and the tendon is what's known as fascia. Fascia is really just a connective tissue, but it kind of looks like almost like a well-structured cobweb. And this is what holds your entire muscle belly together. It also serves some different functions, especially with circulation, but we'll cover that in a later chapter here. From there, we have the epimysium. Anytime you see the suffix here, mesium, that means it's a covering. So anything that's a mesium will cover something else. Your epimysium really is continuous with your fascia. So the epimysium is what is the connective tissue that surrounds the entire muscle belly. The only thing that's really different about the epimysium from the fascia is that the fascia extends all the way through the tendon. The epimysium will go somewhat into there, but then it just kind of forms more or takes up more of a collagen type structure once it gets towards the tendon. So for brevity, think of fascia as covering everything from bone to bone, and then think of the epimysium as just covering the muscle belly itself. After that, we go down one more level here into both our paramecium, and we'll get into the endomysium as well. So the paramecium is a covering inside the muscle belly. And what this does is this is going to really surround groups of muscle fibers. And this is what ends up forming what we know as fascicles. So the next drop down here, we go from having the paramecium, which covers your muscle fascicles, to looking at the fascicle itself. And all a fascicle is a bundle of muscle fibers or a bundle of muscle cells together. When you look at the muscle as a whole, it's almost like a Twizzler's pull and peel. That's really what it comes down to. Now, like I said, all a fascicle is a group of muscle fibers. These muscle fibers are held together by the endomysium. So the endomysium is going to connect all of these muscle fibers together. When you get below the endomysium, so when you go inside here now you get into an individual muscle fiber. So each one of these is an individual muscle fiber. Another name for that is a myocyte. So if you see the term myocyte or muscle fiber, those are the same thing. So your muscle fiber is a single skeletal muscle cell. Now, when we pull out this muscle fiber, we have some different structures surrounding it. The sarcolemma surrounds each individual muscle fiber. And your sarcolemma is just the cell membrane of your muscle cells. So within this, you hold things such as your sarcoplasm, you have your mitochondria in here, and then all of our muscle fiber proteins are in here. After we go from the sarcolemma, we get into the sarcoplasm. So the sarcoplasm, which isn't really pictured here, but this is to a muscle or a skeletal muscle what cytoplasm would be to any other cell. So this is kind of like a gel-like substance that encases where the muscle fibers kind of stick within. It's almost like the goo or gel that the muscle fibers kind of just live in. The important thing about the sarcoplasm is that this is where we have glycogen stored. So your intramuscular glycogen is actually held within these walls here. So it is actually located right next to where the individual subsections of each muscle cell are. So you immediately have all of that potential energy for that. After you get deeper from the sarcoplasm, you get into what's known as a myofibril. A myofibril is just like the subset of the muscle fiber itself. So if you have a fascicle being a bundle of muscle fibers, a muscle fiber being an individual cell, a myofibril makes up, or bundles of myofibrils are what make up the muscle fiber itself. So when you have bunches of myofibrils together, then those all come together to form the actual muscle fiber or the muscle cell. Now, a myofibril is made up of a whole bunch of proteins. And in our next section, or our next learning outcome, I should say, when we talk about more of the microanatomy, we'll see how this all works. But with the myofibril, it's composed of our actin and myosin and also our titin. So these are really important when we talk about muscle contractions. Deep to the myofibril is our sarcomere. And that's not pictured here, but your sarcomere would be essentially repeating segments that together make up your myofibril. So if you can see how there's these nice lines here, and I'll explain these in the next slide, but each one of these sections here is a sarcomere. Making up the subset of the sarcomere are your muscle filaments. Your filaments are just pieces of protein, and what they do is they actually allow or house our muscle contractions, or this is where they actually occur. You have two filaments. You have a thick one and a thin one. Your thick filament is called myosin. Your thin filament is called actin. So actin is thin, myosin is thick. And here's just kind of a better picture here of the microanatomy of it. So again, your sarcolemma is this cell membrane that houses each one of those myofibrils. The sarcoplasm exists within the confines of the sarcolemma. Inside the sarcoplasm is where you have glycogen. It's also where you have mitochondria. Housed within the sarcoplasm is your myofibril. Your myofibril is made up of many sarcomeres. Sarcomeres are just subsections of the myofibril that are composed of different filaments or different proteins, myosin, actin, and I don't have it here, but titin as well. This is where you actually have your contraction occur. And when we talk about the sliding filament theory, we'll get into how that actually works. But there you have it. There's your quick overview here of the hierarchy of muscle structure. So hopefully now you have a little bit better of an understanding of both the macro and micro anatomy of our skeletal muscles. And then when we come back next time, we will be talking about here the sliding filament theory, as well as more of the microanatomy within the muscle fibers themselves. So until next time, I will see you all later.